Good morning, everyone. My name is JP Tasker. I'm a reporter at CBC News, and I'll be moderating today's press conference here. Just before we begin, we have to read off a few preventative measures to share with the audience. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, we remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from microphones at all times. When you are not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose that you will find on the table. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. These measures are in place so we can protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters, and conduct our business without interruption. Thank you all for your cooperation. So today we have with us here Elizabeth May, the co-leader of the Green Party of Canada and the MP for Saanich-Gulf Islands, and some Indigenous leaders from New Brunswick, Quebec, and Ontario who will be sharing their concerns about nuclear waste. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Kim Reeder, and I've traveled here with Indigenous leaders from Wabanaki, homeland. And we've had the honor of being hosted by Chief Lance Haymond of Kabewak on the unceded Algonquin territory, homeland, for the past few days. We've gathered here, as our ancestors have before us, to discuss issues which span geographical boundaries, cultural boundaries, political and generational boundaries. We've been discussing nuclear waste. Member of Parliament for Saanich-Gulf Island and co-leader of the Green Party of Canada, Elizabeth May, has invited those who are meeting to this table. Thank you. Today, Grand Chief Ron Tremblay of Wolastoq Grand Council, Councillor Peyton, Pitawanakwat of Mississauga First Nation, Chief Hugh Akagi of the Peskotomuhkati Nation at Skudik will all share some thoughts with you. Chief.
Kim. Spazagazit Pisazim and Lewis, Gakagos Wagodum, Nagamalsam Wagodum, Wolastoq Gavinel. Good morning. My traditional Wolastoq name is Spazagazit Pisazim, which translates to Morning Star Burning. I'm here representing the Crow clan through my mother's side of the family and the Wolf clan through my father's side. And I am a citizen of the river we call Wolastoq, the beautiful and bountiful river that flows through our homeland. We came here for the last few days talking about nuclear waste. And back in our homeland, our joint homeland with the Passamaquoddies, we have Point Lepreau, which was started to be built back in 1975 and completed in 1983. And back in that time, our people were never consulted or asked about our input or concerns about nuclear. So we're sitting here today talking about nuclear waste and where to put it, and where to place it. And my concern as a traditional chief is if we export the nuclear waste and deliver it through over 425 Indigenous communities, the possibilities of spills or the accidents will occur, and also placing it into the ground in other Indigenous homelands. As we follow very, very strict protocols in our way of governance, we don't feel that we should transport that waste in other people's homelands, especially our sisters and brothers of various nations. And if we were consulted back then at the beginning, we would have major concerns about nuclear. One is I'd like to share a parable. It's like if we built our birch bark canoes without paddles. Just imagine going through a river without a paddle, guiding and directing, knowing where you're going. And it's like today, if you created and made a vehicle without brakes or without safety features like seat belts or airbags, that's exactly what is occurring, is that they created all these nuclear sites without any future intent what and where to store the nuclear waste. This is our concern. And as we know, across Canada and North America and across the world, that the high death rates of Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people have never and has never been addressed in a proper manner. And how we focus and how we believe that the earth is our mother, and she has been violated. She's been hurt, she's been raped, she's been damaged for far, far too long. And it's very comparable to what's happening within our nations with Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people. So there are many factors why the waste should not be transported. As I said before, the risk of the accidents along the road, and from Point Lepreau in New Brunswick to where the proposed dumping site is, it's over 2,000 kilometers. That's a long haul and very dangerous. So we need to really think about this before we move forward in any direction in what to do with this waste. And if we create such a large hole within the earth and what's below the earth, what the harms are to the aquifers and to the life inside the earth, those are my concerns. And will this open the opportunity to various countries like the United States to come and dump their waste into that site? And this would promote the ongoing industry of nuclear, which is not a green way to go. And in my definition of a greener way to go is looking at the forest. The forest is green. The flora and fauna is green. Nuclear is not green. And the risk of the contamination when you mine uranium. And all you have to do is go ask our sisters and brothers of the Navajo Nation and the continue despair that they have to live. And a lot of birth defects, stillborn children, and the high rates of cancer within their nation. And that has never been dealt with. So I firmly sit here as a traditional leader of our homeland and do not support transporting our waste to other nations' homeland. Thank you very much. William.
Ani Bojo, Bano Gamwin Dijnakas, Nimki Beneshi Dodam, Mizwazaging Donjaba, Mississauga Anishinaabe. My name is Peyton, Pitawanakwat, and I take great pride in being a member of the Mississauga First Nation, also known as Mizwazaging, and it is an honor to sit here today to speak about my community. Mississauga First Nation is signatory to the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850. My home is located along the north shore of Lake Huron, along the Mississauga River. Mizwazaging roughly translates to the river of many outlets in Anishinaabe. The river was the heart of my community, and the river is a powerful reminder of the stories that have unfolded here over time. It was a place where we'd gather during the summer months, where Mississauga people would come together to conduct various ceremonies, trade, fish, harvest, plants, food, and medicine. The area was not just a source of sustenance, it was also the center of governance and clan meetings. The area was the very essence of our community. But when you visit the land today, you will not find any recognition of the past. What you will find is the world's largest uranium refinery. This industry now claims ownership of the same area where our ancestors are buried and where our ceremonial lodges once stood. We've witnessed this industry attempt to diminish our historical connection and try to retell a story opposite of what we know. It's been over 40 years since it was constructed, and we are still advocating for the recognition of our rights. The Mississauga First Nation holds the authority to govern its lands, which is obtained from the people in accordance with our community's culture, traditions, customs, and laws. You have to understand that our rights as Anishinaabe people have transcended time. From the time we are born, we come into this world with the rights. These rights have been in existence long before the refinery or any regulatory agency were built, and they will continue long after. It's essential to acknowledge and respect these rights in all decisions and actions moving forward. Mississauga First Nation has never consented to lands being used for nuclear activities, nor as disposal grounds for radioactive wastes, and there continues to be no equitable redress for the loss of access to our ancestral lands. I would like to share that Mississauga First Nation has issued a band council resolution to declare opposition to any future use of the Blind River Refinery site that would see these lands being used as a disposal site for radioactive wastes. Unfortunately, the challenges faced by our First Nation are not unique, and the environmental discrimination is happening all across the country. As Anishinaabe, we recognize with rights comes responsibility, and it is also our inherent responsibility to ensure that our Mother Earth is taken care of. The future of the next 7 generations must be at the heart of the decisions that are being made today, and the voices of our First Nation leaders must be present in all decisions being made with regards to our homelands. Nimigwacha Wendam.
I would like to thank the Ojibwe and Anishinaabe and Algonquin peoples for the opportunity to stand and speak in their territory. I would also like to say thank you for those who have graciously given us their time in order for us to share our voices with this country. You see, I represent a people who welcomed your people to stay here in 1604. 400 years later, I'm back again because you needed our help then, and I think you need our help now. A lot of the things that are happening in my territory, in my homeland, I have problems. I have issues. I am worried. And this brings me to where I was asked, what message would you like to deliver, if you could deliver one message to this country? And it didn't take me long to understand that that message is that I'd like to make this a better world. I'd like to make sure that young people have a future. I'm worried because maybe I didn't understand the language. I was told, or we were told, when we made pre-Confederation treaties, please understand what that means. These predate your law. This predates your existence here, your footprint as a country. So my people have been dealing with these things longer than this country has existed. So why am I so worried about the future? I don't think this is a difficult question. And no one's been able to answer the real question. Who believes that thousands of years of nuclear waste in my territory is a good idea? Who believes this should be a legacy of a footprint? And I told you I may have difficulty with your language because when we negotiated those treaties, they were supposed to last forever and a day. And now we're talking about a toxic waste that's going to be there for thousands of years. And you're acting as if that's nothing. Don't worry. This is what they tell me. It's not a problem. The next generation will handle it. Oh, by the way, that's what they said to the generation before me. So what am I going to believe? That nuclear waste is safe? That they know what they're doing? That they're going to move it to another nation? I don't need to speak to that. The Grand Chief has already covered that. Why would I not want something and yet foist it upon another nation? But my concern for the future means I'm not just worried about Indigenous peoples. I've got to worry about everybody. I don't even have children, but I'm worried about every child. This country, I said you need help. I'm not supposed to peel off and go to what's happened to every fish, every tree, the air, the land, because we're here to talk about nuclear waste. But I've got news for you. It's in trouble. It's all in trouble. And I think we've got to get back to some Indigenous values here. Because when I grew up, I thought I was poor. And it took me a while to realize just how rich I was. To have clean air, unpolluted soil, a high diversity of fish, large numbers. I don't have that anymore. And now here's an industry trying to convince me that they are the solution. I need to debunk some of this, and I've got good people around that are helping me. And now that we know the truth, I'd like to deliver that message. But in order to deliver that message, I need our voices to be heard. I need support from those who are in positions of authority to do that. Because the other thing I'm seeing is there's too much compromise in your system. So I'm asking you, begging you, to listen to our words, to look back instead of looking forward, saying, here's what the future must look like. I don't need a future like that. My future is now. Every child needs to see what I saw. They need to see those fish. They need to see those trees. They need healthy air. And they do not need nuclear contamination for thousands of years. So I'm very simple. My message should be quite clear. Help me preserve the future. I'm on your side. This is not about us and them. This is not about being concerned about how we're going to proceed as Indigenous peoples. Put us back in the equation where we belong. Let us help you, and I'll be your best friend. I'll stand beside you. Thank you.
So it's my honor to join Chief Tremblay, Chief Akagi, and Peyton, Pitawanakwat. I hope I'm saying your name right, from Mississauga, Huron. It's a deep honor to share the electronic talking sticks that are up here. But let me just say really bluntly to any media watching this is going to look like the spiritual, the Indigenous wisdom up against the smart, well-regulated, really modern nuclear industry. So as someone who's been working on this issue for decades, please start asking questions. The so-called small modular reactors, and we've heard from Chief Tremblay about Point Lepreau, built in territory of the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, Passamaquoddy people decades ago. And no, Indigenous people were not consulted. And no, when they set up the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, by its own legislative terms, no one could be on the board of that organization unless they generated nuclear waste. So that precludes any Indigenous nations participating in the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. What's happened in this country is a massive scandal and a propaganda war that I fear we have lost already, because every major news source I look at talks about how nuclear is part of a climate solution and how small modular reactors are somehow going to be good. And when you Google what you were looking for with the small modular reactor in Chief Tremblay's territory on the Wolastoq River at Point Lepreau, it's described as a nuclear recycling facility, a waste reduction facility. So a couple of quick facts, and I would be so grateful if any reporters and journalists watching today's press conference, yes, please take up the issues that are being raised here by Indigenous leadership, but start asking basic questions that Canadian reporters need to ask, like who's behind this mania for small modular reactors. In 2011, Stephen Harper's government sold Atomic Energy of Canada Limited for $15 million. This is bargain basement considering the billions Canadians had invested in it. Sold Atomic Energy of Canada Limited to SNC-Lavalin. Every single small modular reactor project across this country is run by SNC-Lavalin, now called Atkins-Realis. Something wrong with the reputation of the name SNC-Lavalin. They own the Canadian nuclear laboratories. They are the business model behind, yes, Moltex is the company from England that got permission from the government to build the first ever commercial molten salt reactor using plutonium stripped from the high-level nuclear waste at Point Lepreau. That's just one example. But Moltex has admitted that they don't know how to build a reactor. They don't plan to build it. It'll be Atkins-Realis that actually builds it if it ever gets built. And it's a novel technology. It is not something you take off the shelf and say, now we're going to order a bunch of these things out of the catalog. And no, they don't reduce nuclear waste. They increase nuclear waste, and they increase high-level nuclear contaminants that must remain isolated from the biosphere for hundreds of thousands of years. So I hate to say, and I will say as bluntly as I can, this whole thing is a scam and a con to the benefit of the increased profits of a corrupt organization, used to be called SNC-Lavalin. I say corrupt advisedly, so the World Bank won't do contracts with them anymore because of the corruption problem. And our Indigenous leadership is warning us of what the reality is of nuclear waste on Indigenous lands. But as Canadians and as citizens and as taxpayers and all the other ways you might want to describe settler culture Canadians, we're being had. And no one is asking the fundamental questions like, do they know what they're doing? Does this, in what world is nuclear, so-called small modular reactors, any part of a climate solution? The cost of nuclear continues to go up. The cost of safe, renewable wind and solar continues to drop like a stone, and yet the federal government is throwing tens of millions of dollars into promotion of more nuclear as if it's part of anyone's solution. I'll stop there and just say a big, huge Miigwech Walalan. Indigenous leadership is helping us as settler culture Canadians. And what I'm begging our national media outlets, whether print media or electronic, don't take on faith or on the propaganda value of the press releases you're handed. Dig deep and see who's actually behind it, and you'll find a corrupt scam. Thank you.
Thank you all. So we have two reporters on Zoom, I see here. And if you want to ask a question, can you just please hit the raise hand function on Zoom, and I will get you in here. if you want to ask a question, that is. Okay, so we have Angel Moore from APTN. Go ahead, Angel. Can you hear us? Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, good, thank you. Some of the leaders spoke about the nuclear waste. Is there a location proposed that they were talking about, or is there a specific area they were mentioning? I think that was Chief Tremblay. Whoever would like to answer.
I can start. Okay. So there is a current location, first of all, which is in the territory, which is Point Lepreau. And there has been waste on that territory since the beginning of construction, even with with building infrastructure, there's waste, and that waste grows. The various toxicity of that waste also, each stream of waste, high level, intermediate level, low level, those inventories are growing. And there is a plan, it's not our plan, there is a plan of the NWMO, which is the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. I think, Elizabeth, you mentioned that group. Their plan is to move the high-level nuclear waste here to Ontario. But we've been told at home that in the interim, it's very safe to stay right where it is. The NWMO plan wouldn't even kick in. Nothing would be transported, even within their current plan, for an additional 30 years. And Chief, actually, did you also?
So the answer to your question, of course, is yes. There are plans, and those plans do include, just what Kim is saying, but we're dubious as to how these plans work. You see, I've been attending meetings in places including Toronto where they discussed over 20 years ago how there was this plan to bury the nuclear waste in the Canadian Shield, et cetera, et cetera. And that was nearly 20 years ago. So I'm told that those plans are changing. And one of those plans, of course, is that, well, it's kind of safe right where it is. That's in my territory, my backyard, my homeland, and little old New Brunswick. So it's a moving target. Are there plans? Yes, but I think one of the plans is not to have a plan. It's simply to keep things moving in our minds that, we know what we're doing and we know what we're going to do to store nuclear waste, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing, we're talking about people I've never met. So the idea of being here was an opportunity to come to the territory of those who will experience what I'm experiencing, something they don't want in their territory. And that's the opportunity to meet the chiefs who are involved, who are making decisions for their nations. And it seems to be a little different story from what I'm told when I meet with the regulators, if not the owners of this industry. So it's, again, a moving target. And I'm not sure what to believe anymore, except I don't believe most of what I hear. And that is that there's a plan that's going to make sure that everything is safe, harmless. It won't be a problem in the future. But that includes a lot of, and the moving parts include moving nuclear fuel throughout numerous territories. It involves storing it in someone else's backyard. So am I going to do that? Am I going to say, well, as long as it's not in mine? No. I would like to stand behind with the other Indigenous leaders who are going to experience the very thing I'm experiencing, if they haven't experienced it already, and that is thousands of years of nuclear waste, that they really don't know what to do with it.
And Councillor Peyton, your situation with waste is a little bit different again.
Yeah, so the industry had planned to, they had released a preliminary decommissioning report that was a public summary stating that they had plans to consolidate waste from 3 facilities at the end of their life and bring it to the Blind River Refinery site. And when I say that we're opposed to the nuclear waste, this is what I'm referring to, because we were not included in those discussions and we have yet to have those discussions.
Angel, do you have a follow-up question?
What are you hoping? Are you consulting with the federal government? Have you had been any talks with them? And do you feel you're making any progress?
So Mississauga First Nation, we are engaged in discussions with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, but I believe that there's a lot more in-depth discussions that need to be had, and we really are at a point where we need to reset the relationship and ensure that our rights are being upheld.
Thank you very much.
What we would really like is to have this removed, properly stored, looked after, cared for, and it's something that we were told was only going to be a 25-year project for a nuclear power plant, which is in its 40th year. Again, we were told that they were going to bury it in the Canadian Shield, and that was convenient because they had a mine that was abandoned, and it's something like 3 miles deep. So this was supposed to be a repository that was a solution. But we would like to have it removed, but I think part of the problem is we are generating something and we don't know what to do with it. Shouldn't we at least stop the bleeding, stop the problem? But that doesn't seem to be a conversation either. And even back in 2003 or 4 when I attended this first meeting, and those are Indigenous leaders across the province, by the way, we were told, first of all, when we went in the room, that we could only talk about waste. We could not talk about the industry. And we thought this was kind of strange, that the very creature that's generating this is removed from the problem. So that was our message. Our first message to this government was, you need to talk about the whole story, put it together, stop generating it, and since then everything has gone in the other direction. So yes, we are trying to deliver the message. We're trying to get this information out to the public. We're trying to understand why consultation means we will hear what you have to say, but that doesn't mean we will do anything about it. We need to have real conversation, real dialogue that has real meaning, and we like to know that our voices are going to mean something when the conversation's over at the end of the day. It's not too difficult, really.
Thank you, Chief. While I have you here, Elizabeth, May, I'm going to ask you a question from the moderator's chair, if that's all right. We have a kind of a news story we're working on today. You might have seen that Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre suggested last night that if he's elected, he'll use the notwithstanding clause to push through his criminal justice reforms, if you want to call them that, like bail changes and keeping people convicted of murder in maximum security prisons for the entirety of their sentence. What do you make of his suggestion that he'll use the notwithstanding clause to push through changes like that?
Thank you, JP. I'm just acknowledging the leadership of Indigenous people at this table with me. Would you mind if I answer a question that doesn't have anything to do with what you came here today to talk about? Is it all right with you?
I think Grand Chief Ron would like to make some closing remarks first, if that's okay.
If that's all right, do you want to make your closing remarks and then I'll answer
Sure.
Mr. Tasker's question? Okay, thank you.
I'd like to refer to the late friend of mine, Art Manuel, who is from British Columbia, who passed several years ago, and we met at the United Nations Permanent Forum there in New York City. And one of his books he wrote, and he quotes, "It's always been about the land, dealing with our people, dealing with the first peoples of this land, and the displacement of our peoples into these little postage stamp federal institutions that we call reservations, and who rose glasses, citing through rose glasses, calling them First Nations. Well, they're plainly reservations with numbers. And as Chief Hugh referred to, back in the signing of our 1725-26 peace and friendship treaties, and referring back to them, is that there was no surrender of any lands and any resources. And I always say that our peoples from the Wabanaki Confederacy did not surrender one piece of earth, one drop of water, or one breath of air. In fact, in Section 6 of the Peace and Friendship Treaties, it clearly states that any Indian who is molested or damaged will receive satisfaction and reparation. And we have not received neither satisfaction nor reparation to this date. And those treaties are law. They're law. And the provincial and the federal governments refuse to honor those treaties. And this is why we're sitting here today. If they would have honored them treaties from day one, we would not be sitting here talking about nuclear waste, or talking about pipelines, or talking about spraying of glyphosate, or talking about tungsten mine that is the project that's imposed in our backyard again, that we were never at the tables. So our treaties have to be respected and honored. Thank you very much. Leave it.
With that then, and a huge Walalan Miigwech, it's very clear to me that the country is at grave risk of losing respect for the rule of law, losing respect for our Constitution, when sloganeering untethered from principle becomes acceptable in political discourse. I've been thinking about it a lot, JP, because of the really remarkable near miscarriage of justice that occurred for Mr. Umar Zamir. I went to law school. Pierre Poilievre didn't. I know it's generally seen that there's too many lawyers in politics. I don't think there's nearly enough when you can have someone say they'd use the notwithstanding clause to drive through criminal justice changes that absolutely upend centuries of fundamental principles of what's generally called, and forgive me, in such a colonial context, British criminal law. Lord Blackstone in the 1700s said it's better that 10 guilty men go free than one innocent suffer. I don't think that would make it through the Conservative Party platform these days. Jail, not bail is a great rhyming slogan, which seems to be the acid test of conservative policy. If you can't make it rhyme, you might as well forget about it. I'm deeply disturbed that Mr. Poilievre would think it's acceptable to suggest the federal government would use a notwithstanding clause to bulldoze through not just our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but centuries of adherence to the principle that anyone in our criminal justice system is innocent until proven guilty, Bail particularly applies before sentencing. Mr. Poilievre's source of legal principle appears to come from Lewis Carroll, certainly not Judge Blackstone. Sentence first, verdict later, evidence never. It's not, to me, about the politics of it nearly as much as it is about the foundational constitutional principles of what makes our criminal justice system legitimate and what makes our society have any pretense of being civilized. So there really aren't words for what I think of the suggestion that we need to throw people in jail and throw away the key, that we should put people like Umar Zamir. I mean, when the chief of police of Toronto expresses disappointment that a totally innocent person is found not guilty, when it's clear in that one instance that Toronto police officers colluded, cooked up a lie, practiced the lie together, and then committed perjury in hopes of sending an innocent man to jail on first-degree murder charges for what was a tragic accident. That one example, to me, highlights the perils of the approach to criminal justice and the so-called tough-on-crime approach of Mr. Poilievre. He wants to take a wrecking ball to the foundational principles of our civilization. And there really just aren't words more than that to what I think of his proposal.
Thank you for indulging that question. And if there are no other questions, which I don't see there are, that concludes today's press conference. Thank you all for coming.
I don't know that I'll go very far in this country suggesting we need more lawyers in Parliament, but maybe more people who are literate would help. I don't know. Thank you so much. Meg Widge. Thank you. Wallalan. We got to keep going, guys. Thank you. And thank you to the reporters who came today.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.